Tomorrow is the day in which the United Nations has said that the 6th billionth person will be born. Symbolically, they have designated...
Now a milestone for all of us on this planet today. The United Nations declared that today the world's population reached 7 billion people. And for all our differences...
Global population is projected to hit an all-time high on Tuesday of 8 billion people. That's according to the United Nations.
Well, if they kept such a clock in Italy, it would be ticking backwards. The government there thinks there are not enough Italians.
Demographers warn that the shrinking population could drag the country into an unprecedented economic crisis.
Dire predictions of an overpopulated planet have been with us for centuries. What if they're just plain wrong?
Alert! The number of babies born in America last year falling to a 32-year low.
But there is already a population crisis hitting major economies across the globe.
Look at these numbers. How do you explain this decline?
You know, you've got cases like Japan where adult diapers outsell baby diapers.
The world's falling birth rate isn't on the list of major threats to life as we know it, but it soon will be. Taxes are destined to soar, pension systems will become unsustainable, while our healthcare systems won't be able to cope with the ratio of old people to take care of compared to the shrinking number of taxpayers. Businesses will struggle to find workers to hire, school closures will accelerate, while social care will continually be slashed.
And they say it's an economic time bomb.
I'm worried about the birth rate. Most people think we have like too many people on the planet, but actually this is an outdated view. I think that the biggest problem the world will face in 20 years is population collapse. Collapse. I want to emphasize this. The biggest issue in 20 years will be population collapse.
Not ready to be a father. After the breakup, I start everything from zero. That's why I got very personal, very emotional because you know when you first know that your partner didn't want, it's quite heartbreaking. ทีนะพี่หนูไม่ได้แบบหนูไม่ได้เล่าให้ใครฟังเลยว่า
This is my story too. Sometimes my husband is a granddad, he is a great, but you see he still enjoy his auto life, his drinking and all that.
Oh, พี่ไม่เคยรู้เรื่องเราขนาดนี้ไงโทษทีนะพี่
I try to just, I look at it as like season
5. Why are people having so few children? The more I read about falling birth rates, everything was negative. You enter a downward spiral. As you have fewer and fewer children, you have fewer and fewer future mothers, which in turn goes on and on and on. And no society in history has been known to come out of that spiral. I started the Birthgap project in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 2016 after seeing data for Germany showing there are only half the number of children there now compared to 50 years ago.
So what are we going to talk about today?
Global population collapse, what else? A fun topic. How's the audio? As a lifelong learner, I had been brushing up my skills on data science. My goal had been to find an explanation to one of the world's great mysteries. Why did the number of children being born in Italy, Japan, and Germany fall so rapidly at the exact same time? Whether data can help answer that question or not, one thing's for certain, with this trend having spread across the entire industrialized world and beyond, we're all going to notice. Due to globalization, a worldwide cascade of shrinking economies will affect all nations, including the US.
for a society with a sizable population to experience continuous and very rapid population decline in a prosperous and peaceful time. It's never happened in human history. There's no precedent.
Should we be worried about population decline?
Population decline is a form of social change. Can government be a practical substitute for the family structure that we took for granted up until, let's say, like breakfast yesterday morning? That's going to be really hard, I think.
Am I right that people aren't talking enough about this?
In my view, incontestably you're correct. So why aren't they talking about it more? Well, to some degree, maybe people haven't been run over by this problem themselves yet.
Do people talk much about falling birth rates?
I don't think that people talk a lot about this. It's a minor problem, I think.
Are you worried about America's long-term low birth rates?
I don't think it's a terrible thing. Culturally, birth rates have different rising and fallings.
Are people worried about this, about not having children? Do you worry about
I don't worry. Do you worry?
No.
We don't worry
No, you
about
don't
these
worry.
things. We have other things to worry about.
But is it really a problem? Is it bad for the country? No. Is it bad for workforces? We have robots. We have much more automated work. So why is it a problem?
What people usually don't think about, it's a little bit counterintuitive, but what is unavoidable is massive graying, massive aging of the society. And so all of these places in the world which are under substantial below replacement childbearing for decade after decade are on a trajectory not only for shrinking, but also for really massive population aging.
So you were shocked about hearing about
I was really shocked. The professor told us that, our generation is decreasing, so that we need to protect our older generation. And he showed the statistics. I'm really worrying about Japanese future.
What about Germany?
Let's look at Germany. This is the map.
Oh dear. Look at that.
I would not have expected this. I was not aware of this. Not at all. What's the impact of this? Huh?
Understanding population trends can be tricky, partly because it takes decades for changes to play out. Initially, low birth rates are almost undetectable, except to maternity wards, but soon enough, we'll find closing schools, businesses that can't find staff to hire, and then close because they can't find enough customers. And meanwhile, the cost of providing our older generations with healthcare and pensions will continue to rise and rise as more and more people live longer and longer. To understand the scale of the problem, we just need to look at the world's falling fertility rates and how many countries have fallen below the population tipping point. Demographers call this tipping point the replacement level, when women on average are having 2 children that survive into adulthood. Today, 70% of us live in countries below that tipping point, and yet somehow our focus has remained on fears of never-ending population growth.
In the world of statistics, Hans Rosling is a rock and roll star. And in an era where the talk is of rapid population growth, he uses hard data to try to communicate the opposite story. Here's a clip from his film, airing tomorrow night on BBC Two.
Up to 8, and then it goes up to 9, and then it goes here. But see, it's slowing down. By the end of the century, it's becoming more flat there. And if I do...
No one could explain population trends better than the late Hans Rosling, including why our total headcount will increase for a while, despite the number of children having peaked.
Now, this will confuse you, because how can then the total population grow like this if the children doesn't increase? Where will all these adults come from? And to explain that, I will show you the world population, ladies and gentlemen, in the form of foam blocks. 1 block is 1 billion. We have 2 billion children in the world. Then we have 2 billion between 15 and 30 years of age. We have 1 billion 30 to 45. We have 1 billion 45 to 60. And then we have my block, 60 years and older. We are here on top. Huh? So this is what we have today. Now, what will happen in the future? Do you know what happens to old people like me? They die. The rest, they grow 15 years older and have 2 billion children. These ones are now old, time to die. And then these ones grow 15 years older and they have 2 billion children. This one die and the rest grow 15 years older and have 2 billion children. And without increasing the number of children, without increasing the length of life, we have 3 billion people more by this big inevitable fill-up of adults, which will happen just when the large young generations grow up.
Hans Rosling's building blocks explain beautifully how the world's total population is going to fill up with older people and not children. After 50 years of unsustainably low birth rates, countries in Europe and Japan are fast becoming inverted worlds with too many retirees for their shrinking workforces to support. If we look at Italy, for example, in 2019 there were around 1 million people aged 50 who will be retiring in around 20 years' time. Then, if we look at the number of newborns who, in around 20 years' time, will be entering the workforce to support these retirees, they're less than half. Any large gap between the number of newborns and the number of people they will have to support into retirement is significant socially and economically. Given that these gaps are being caused by long-term low birth rates, I decided to call any shortfall in workers birth gaps. I wanted to show these birth gaps on a series of regional maps. First, I colored any regions that did have more babies than 50-year-olds green. But in regions where there were too few children being born, I used increasingly dark shades of red, with the darkest red meaning there are less than half the number of babies being born compared to the older people they would need to support. And at the center of any region with a birth gap, I put a gaping black hole proportional to the drop in the number of children.
Oh wow, it's a big gap.
It's kind of scary.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Oh.
Gosh, that's major, isn't it?
It's like a shock. It's for me. It's like a shock. What are we making with our future? We are crazy. Yeah? This is not good.
It's clear. It's a very powerful transformation.
But now I want to show you, let's jump to somewhere else.
Deutschland, yeah.
Germany.
Yeah. Auf Wiedersehen.
The school leaders are talking about less kids coming in the next few years. So obviously we're going to have less classes and less jobs for teachers.
Do you think people should be talking about this more?
I think so, yes. I think so. Because me as a young teacher, I'm not thinking about this, but maybe I should do more.
By 2020, every country in Europe except Iceland had more 50-year-olds than newborns. Yet fertility data hadn't been able to explain why. Given this trend started in multiple countries across Europe and Japan at the exact same time, this can't be some big coincidence. There had to be a common explanation.
We don't have any role model in the real world. It's really rare to see how children are raised. We are just really worrying about it.
I'm kind of not ready.
Hell no. Hell to the no. I'm not ready to have kids.
I've always thought about having kids. I'm also not in a place where I'm married or pregnant or thinking about getting pregnant. So maybe in a few years that'll be another discussion.
All of my friends are head down into their career. None of them are married and none of them have kids. Everybody's just career driven. So I feel so much pressure from my family and Kenny's family. They're constantly asking us, when are you going to have kids? And just trying to explain to them, I just really want to establish my career first.
I'm still very much focused on getting at a certain place in my career,
before thinking of, like, my brain cannot even think about that yet.
I think in Japan, marry means end of life for the humans.
I've always wanted to have children. I've always wanted to have children while I was young, but not now.
I had to go through the motions and emotions of my life, and I think I had to do my career and do the marriage and get to the mental place of it's time.
I don't want to be that mom that misses my child's first steps because I'm away. I want to wait until I can say, you know, I can afford the time off. It's fine.
So when would that be?
That's the crazy thing. I don't know.
And now, birth gaps are coming to America. By 2020, the exact same trend saw 39 states with more 50-year-olds than newborns, with New England leading the way with a 29% birth gap. America is starting to notice.
Fewer babies born in America last year than at any time since Ronald Reagan. That is what's not. The birth rate is way, way down.
It is. The disturbing trend is that the fertility rate falling below the replacement level. In other words, the workforce becomes too small to support the growing retiree segment. It's a very troubling trend. As you've said before, we've seen it in Japan, Italy, and elsewhere.
Who would have thought we'd open the show with the birth rate falling to the 32-year low?
Having started in Europe and Japan at the exact same time, this trend has spread relentlessly across the entire industrialized world and beyond. Yet the only connection I could find was a common anomaly. When we say replacement rate is when the average woman is having 2 children, of course, not all women are having 2 children. Some will be having 1, some having 3 and 4, and some, for differing reasons, having none. In very simple terms, if we exclude those having more than 4 children, to get an average of 2 children per woman, those having 3 and 4 should be in balance with those having either 1 child or none. To get an overall birth rate of less than 2, it's a mathematical necessity that those having more than 2 are outnumbered by those having none or 1. The lower birth rates go, the proportion of people having no children or 1 child must get greater and greater. The conundrum was that 1-child families were proving hard to find across all of these countries.
I have a younger brother.
I have an older brother, an older sister, and a younger sister.
I have sisters and brothers.
私が2人姉妹で、
今兄弟は4人ですね。
I have one sister.
1人兄がいます。
I have a sister and brother.
I have 4 siblings, 2 sisters and 2 brothers.
Why could I not find these smaller families with only 1 child? Something wasn't right. One of the golden rules of data science is to use the most granular data possible to understand trends. What I needed was an annual measure of childlessness, but it simply didn't exist. The aha moment came when I saw the UN collects data on the number of first-time mothers and the children they then go on to have for many countries. Matching this data with total fertility rate data allowed me to calculate the missing piece in our giant population puzzle. The results connected everything. In Japan in 1974, around half of women were having 2 children, just over 1 in 5 was having 3, a similar number was having 1, and 6% were having 4 or more. Overall, the average Japanese mother was having 2.2 children, and with only 1 person in 20 remaining childless, the overall fertility rate for Japan was 2.1 children per woman. But somehow, over the next 3 short years, childlessness exploded to reach 1 person in 4. Yet the percentage of mothers having 1, 2, 3, or 4 or more children hadn't changed at all. This wasn't a shift to smaller families. This was simply an explosion in childlessness. Wind the clock forward to 1990, and childlessness in Japan had reached 1 in 3 women, and yet the average children per mother had increased slightly to 2.3. Since 1990, this pattern has been locked in Japan, with almost no change to family structure or the 1 in 3 remaining childless. Even the proportion of mothers having 4 or more children has remained at 6%, exactly the same as 1974. Until 1973, Japan's economy was booming and the number of babies was booming. But all of that was about to change. Out of the blue, the global oil shock saw 1974 bring soaring prices and shortages of the basics. And from this exact moment, we can see from the data that young people without children started to delay parenthood. And from this same moment, across every prefecture in Japan, there was a surge in childlessness. Japan was hit hard by the oil shock. It was the world's largest importer of oil at the time. And across the entire country, many young people decided it wasn't the time to become parents. And we can see from the data, this delaying of parenthood meant that many never would. Across in Europe, Italy is described by academics as having been the worst hit by the oil shock. Family structure in Italy in 1974 was remarkably similar to Japan. On average, mothers were having 2.3 children. Childlessness was even less in Japan, with only 1 in 30 people having no children, meaning that the overall fertility rate was 2.3 children per woman. Wind the clock forward only 3 years, and we find just like Japan, childlessness exploded from 1 in 30 people to 1 in 5. By 1990, 1 in 3 people in Italy were destined to be childless, and by 2018, childlessness had reached 2 in every 5 Italians. Yet throughout this time, just like Japan, family structure hadn't changed at all. But this story isn't about Japan and Italy. Across the entire industrialized world, where we have data, in recent decades there's been no change in family structure. Across these countries in the late 1980s, the average mother was having 2.4 children. 40 years later, that number is exactly the same. And all of these nations, just like Japan and Italy in the 1970s, have transitioned to become childless nations. Nations where 1/3 or more of people will be childless for life. For America and many countries around the world, it was the 2007 financial crisis. Before the crisis, the average mother in the US was having 2.5 children, and only 1 in 7 people were childless. Yet just like other financial crises around the world, within a few short years, childlessness would rocket to reach 1 in 3 people. And yet during the same time, the average number of children per mother in the US increased from 2.5 to 2.6. The 2007 financial meltdown was a global crisis, and just like the US, the transition to childlessness happened in Canada, Malaysia, Netherlands, Costa Rica, Ireland, and beyond. With so many examples of crises around the world triggering high levels of childlessness, and with no example of any society ever recovering, this feels like a trap. A birth gap trap where it becomes a societal norm to start families in their 30s, when for many, it simply won't happen. I'd been searching for the answer to the wrong question. Instead of asking why people are having so few children today, I should have been asking why so few people become parents today. It turns out there is no trend towards smaller families. People who do become parents are just as likely to go on to have 2, 3, 4 or more children as decades ago. It's all about having the first child. With childlessness having exploded so fast during times of uncertainty in so many countries, this doesn't feel like childlessness by choice, This feels like unplanned childlessness.
Hello, my name is Jodie Day and I'm a childless woman. And I'd like to introduce you to my tribe. This tribe has always been amongst us, but what's different about it now are the numbers. 1 in 5 women like me, born in the 1960s, turned 45 without having had children. That's double what it was for our mother's generation.
We rarely get to hear from the many childless people who had hoped to have a family one day. Yet academic studies, large-scale surveys and my own research confirm that the majority of childless people had planned to have children one day.
So that leaves a whopping 80% of women without children, childless by circumstance, with those circumstances varying widely.
So a big reason why we're seeing more and more infertility these days is because of delayed childbearing. As women's eggs get older, it just gets harder to get pregnant. Imagine that these are eggs, okay? And this is a 20-year-old. So when a 20-year-old comes in and we do an ultrasound and we're able to see these 20 follicles, I tell them this is great news. You're 20, you have all these 20 eggs and this is for this month. And next month, you're gonna get another 20 eggs. Except that when a woman is 20, not all her eggs are good. For every 5 eggs that she has, as young as she is, for every 5 eggs that she has, maybe 3 of them are good. Those are the orange ones. And even a 20-year-old, as healthy and as young as a 20-year-old is, 2 of those eggs out of 5 might not be good. This is a 20-year-old. This is a 45-year-old. You see how things have changed between 20 and 45. Now, 45-year-olds still have good eggs, but these are hard to find. It's how nature does its job.
Even though there are some amazing technologies today like egg freezing or embryo freezing to help women delay this childbearing time in their life, I don't think that either the media or what you hear from other people always really explains the depths of how much struggle there really could be.
When a celebrity conceives late in life, reproductive life, we probably know it's an egg donor, or it's possible that she froze embryos a long time ago. It's definitely a misunderstanding, a miscommunication, a miseducation of the public.
I literally wake up every single morning, I get emotional and I bless my children because I just feel very, very fortunate that I was able to have them.
I'm someone who married at 37 and had always thought I would have kids, and then it turned out I wasn't going to. And I think it can be a tremendous source of unhappiness.
For me, it wasn't a decision. I don't remember a time when I said, okay, I'm not going to have a family.
It would have helped if I'd known it was grief, or if the doctors and therapists I consulted about my life-wrecking distress had known, but they didn't. Grief is a language that this lost tribe speaks fluently.
Yo pensaba que tenía tiempo, que mi década entre los 30 y los 40 iban a ser suficientes como para que yo pudiera desarrollar mi actividad profesional y después tenía tiempo para ser madre. Y bueno, hice mal los cálculos, postergué porque creí que tenía tiempo.
Did you want to have children?
Sim. Gostaria de ter tido filho há 5 anos atrás. Gostaria. Mas não aconteceu. Mas gostaria sim. Gostaria de ter tido antes. De poder ter tido filho antes.
20代の頃にもっとデートをしてもっといい人を見つけてもっと子供を作るように努力すればよかったと思ってます。
I think if you caught me at the right day in my 20s when I was very in love or excited about a partner, I would say yes. But if you were to pry into that, I might say, oh no, that seems crazy to have a kid in my 20s.
Llegó un momento en mi vida que a lo mejor sí quise de verdad intentarlo nuevamente, pero era muy tarde, too late.
I just want to get synchronized with my husband, whether our plan, our saying is still on the same page.
Has he answered you yet?
He did not actually.
Do you want to ask now?
Yeah, yes. We plan to have children for the fact